Number 10. Wind. Wind is the name of the main character from the self-titled series, also of course named Wind. It comes from Boom Studios and was written by James Tynion IV with art by Michael Dalianos. Wind is a teenage hero who has always hidden the truth of his elven and magical heritage as a weird blood. His heritage grants him great power he's been hiding from his whole life in an attempt to fit in, being made to believe that magic is dangerous and basically turns people into monsters, or in some other way corrupts them. When he becomes too old to hide his pointed ears and who he is any longer, he is forced to either try and change or embrace who he really is. And in order to protect his friends against those who would hunt both him and them down, Wind ultimately embraces his magical side, unleashing powerful abilities. Wind has wings, can fly, and can communicate with force like spirits or sprites. He also has, like many other teen heroes, the power of friendship, which usually means he ends up making friends with powerful allies. I would say if you love the world of Avatar, you might also end up falling in love with both the character Wind and his series. It reminds me of Avatar, at least, in like the best way. Number 9. Lord Fanny. Lord Fanny is Hilda Morales, who was born as a boy but raised as a girl. She is a transsexual woman and one of the first trans heroes in comics. Lord Fanny was raised as a girl by her grandmother because only women in their culture could become witches, and her grandmother was a powerful witch who wanted to pass on her knowledge and power to Fanny. Although Fanny herself did choose to be a girl, if that makes sense. Lord Fanny is a member of the Invisibles team and was created by writer Grant Morrison and artist Steve Yoel. The Invisibles was a comic series that existed as part of DC's Vertigo imprint back when it was around. I miss Vertigo so much. The series began in 1994, and in issue 13 we'd learn more about Lord Fanny's origins and her very tragic backstory. Lord Fanny's such a cool character. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about even more cool, lesser known indie heroes, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Quantum and Woody. You may have heard of Valiant's character Bloodshot, who recently got his own solo film, but what about all of their other superheroes? Quantum and Woody is a series and superhero duo from Valiant Comics. It was inspired by the superhero team-up series Power Man and Iron Fist, but is a lot more bizarre. The series itself was written by Christopher Priest, with art actually by the artist who did Power Man and Iron Fist. Pretty cool. Quantum and Woody are adoptive brothers who, after years of being estranged, are brought back together when their father mysteriously dies. While trying to figure out what really happened to him, they stumble upon superpowers. The catch? They must touch their power bands at least once every 24 hours to not only keep their powers, but also keep from losing their lives as well, as they would then no longer exist if they didn't touch their band. Quantum's powers are more defense-based, while Woody's are more offensive. Oh, and they also kind of have an animal sidekick, Vincent Van Gogh, who is even more bizarre than he already sounds. Just trust me. I don't want to spoil anything, but Vincent Van Gogh. What a goat. Number 7. Josephine. More commonly referred to as Jo, Josephine is the main character and hero of the Fatale series. More commonly referred to as Jo, Josephine is the main character and hero of the Fatale series, which comes to us from Image Comics. Fatale is a supernatural noir-style comic created by the brilliant team-up of writer Ed Brubaker and artist Sean Phillips. Seriously, I love these two together. Some might argue that Jo isn't really a hero, as she's a little bit selfish, but in focusing on uncovering the mysteries of her own power and in trying to save herself, she does inevitably save others. In the long run, at least. There are a lot of people that end up being sacrificed along the way in order for Jo to stand a chance in defeating her enemies in the end. And also there are just straight up people being sacrificed along the way by her enemies who are attempting to track her down. So yeah, she kinda also gets a lot of people killed, but you know, it's not her fault. Jo's powers allow her to control all men who gaze upon her, with them being irresistibly attracted to her no matter who they are and no matter if she wants to influence them or not. Unless of course they are able to protect themselves against her influence with extremely powerful magic, which we only see from a couple characters really in the series. In other words, her power is pretty freaking strong. The only downside here, which is kind of the crux of it all, is that she can't fully control her powers. That is, she can't turn them off when she wants to, which ends up causing a lot of problems for Jo along the way, but I won't spoil any of that. Anyways, if you haven't read Fatale, it's now, I think, it's gonna be 10 years old soon, so go and read it. Hurry up! Came out I think in 2012. That's when it started. Number 6. King Mob. King Mob is the leader of the Invisibles. He was once a horror writer who wrote under the pen name Kit Morrison. As the series The Invisibles is created by Grant Morrison, Mob is believed to be sort of a fictional stand-in for Morrison himself. King Mob's legal name was Gideon Starozowski, and he struggles with his alter persona, especially troubled by how violent he, as King Mob, can be. King Mob is not only a leader who wields power in that sense, because he's a leader, but also has experience with firearms and weapons, is a skilled martial artist and fighter, is psychic, can time travel, and employs the use of chaos magic. So, lots of cool things that he can do. Also, if you haven't read The Invisibles, it is really trippy. Go read it. If you like The Matrix, you'll probably like The Invisibles. If you like The Matrix and if you like Doom Patrol, which of course is also Grant Morrison. Not The Matrix, Doom Patrol. Number 5. Laura Wilson / Persephone. Laura Wilson is the main character of the Wicked and the Divine series from Image Comics. The series was created by writer Kieran Gillen and artist Jamie McKelvey. In this story, gods come to life cyclically, being kinda reincarnated. This is known as the recurrence. Laura herself is obsessed with the gods and the pantheon, who are all of course re-emerging at the time. She wants nothing more than to be a god herself. At least that is what she thinks she wants, until her wishes kind of come true. She is revealed to be Persephone, who is believed to be the final god to return during the recurrence. As Persephone, she can summon plants and vines and control them. She also seems to have some kind of control or influence over the underworld. Laura can also create fireballs and reveal to others past events, summoning visions of the past even if she was not present for those events. Number 4. Sludge. Sludge is a hero or anti-hero who comes to us initially from Malibu Comics and was created by writer Steve Gerber and artist Aaron Lopresti. Sludge was once Frank Hogue, a dirty NYPD police officer who accepted bribes in exchange for favors when it came to drug dealings. He was ordered by the crime boss he worked for, John Paul Marcello, to kill another likely dirtier cop. When Frank refused Marcello's request, Marcello had him killed instead. After being shot, a grenade went off, knocking him into a bucket of chemical waste. Who put that chemical waste there? The waste would merge with him after he was dumped into the sewers, turning him into the superheroic monstrosity Sludge. Sludge possesses a healing factor and super strength. He could also kill or mutate his opponents with just a touch. Kinda turns them into sludge. It's pretty dark, really. Number 3. Radiant Yellow. We don't know that much about the newest Radiants, but we do know that they seem interested in protecting innocent people from whatever craziness is currently going on. Okay, hard to keep talking about all of this Radiant Black series without spoiling anything, but once again, I'm gonna try my best. Radiant Yellow appears to be an older gentleman, and as far as I know, we don't really know his name yet. What we do know is that each Radiant seems to have their own power set. At least that's what we're being led to believe by the story and the imagery used. It hasn't exactly all been laid out yet, which is honestly kind of what makes this series so much fun. There's so much we don't know. The mystery of it all. Radiant Yellow, however, seems to have powers based in perhaps light manipulation. To me, that's what it looks like the force blasts that they emit are based in, and it also looks to me like they can perhaps manipulate light to create illusions. That's just based on the imagery that's surrounding them in the comics. Like the other Radiants, Yellow isn't too experienced and doesn't seem to understand the full extent of their powers just yet. Radiant Yellow comes to us from the Radiant Black series, which belongs to Image Comics and is written by Kyle Higgins, who, yes, was also the initial writer of the Power Rangers series, and it was also created by artist Marcelo Costa. Number 2. Exo Manowar. Valiant Comics actually has a whole stable and universe filled with supers, including this one here, Exo Manowar. Exo Manowar is actually the name of the sentient armor that is tied to our hero in this series, Auric of Dacia, a Visigoth from the 5th century AD. Auric would end up being abducted by aliens and enslaved for years before he managed to escape. Auric learned of where his captive's armory was kept and basically ended up getting there and then getting the Exo Manowar suit. He then bonded with the suit and used that advanced tech to escape his captors. However, due to interstellar travel, by the time he arrived back on Earth, it was now the 20th century, basically modern day. Eric would have to adjust to this very different world, and along the way would meet other superheroes from the Valiant universe. That's right, there's not just 2 more, there's a whole bunch of them. Exo Manowar is a character created by writers Jim Shooter, Steve Englehart, and as well as artists Bob Layton and Barry Windsor Smith. Number 1. Black Hammer. Black Hammer is Joe Weber, the title character of the Black Hammer series, written by Jeff Lemire with artwork by the amazing Dean Ormston. The Black Hammer series was made to be completely different from other more traditional superhero comics, but if I did have to compare Black Hammer to anyone from that more conventional world, I would liken him to Thor myself. Joe Weber inherited the hammer and powers of the former Black Hammer when he died, being transported to the realm of New World as soon as he himself had picked up the fallen hammer. There he learned that he was meant to become the new Black Hammer, replacing the fallen one as Starlock's new and most powerful warrior in the fight against Starlock's evil twin, the Anti-God. While being the title character, Black Hammer isn't actually the main character of this series. As we learn near the end of issue number 1, Black Hammer sacrificed himself to save the world from the Anti-God and keep his fellow superheroes and friends alive. But what really happened to him, and just how and why are his teammates now seemingly trapped in the timeless and kinda eerie town of Rockwood? Well, to find out, you'll have to read on, true believers. But honestly, you should just go read Black Hammer because it's pretty great. Everyone go read all the Black Hammer things. It's like a whole universe now.
And at 10, Tony Stark. Wilson Fisk's men attempted to kill Anthony Stark in order to silence his drunken singing, forcing Sheriff Rogers to intervene and save his life. Tony Stark later donned the suit of battle armor to save the life of Red Wolf. However, this suit looks more like a train than a battle mech suit, and in all honesty, it's the perfect combination of these two things. First appearing in 1872 number 1 from 2015, this version of the Iron Man armor is one that I want to see someone cosplay because holy damn, this look is based off the original Iron Man suit, and like, you know, the one Tony Stark built in a cave with a pile of scraps. Yeah, it's that one, but make it dark steampunk basically. But by steampunk I also mean steam engine. Well, combustion engine. I don't know much about trains. You know the train that Marty and Doc used to get the DeLorean up to 85 and then back to 1985 and Back to the Future Part 3? Yeah, that, but an Iron Man suit. I feel like the Tony from 1972 was the one who made that train fly and time travel. I feel like he was the one that Doc went to. In a 9, Gazer Beam. Simon J. Palladino, also known as Gazer Beam, is a minor character in The Incredibles. He only briefly appears in the film alive, but his disappearance and death really is what sets the events of the movie into motion. Gazer Beam was a member of the superhero team known as the Phantasmics, but conflicts with Everseer led him to leave the team, and he soon joined with the Thrilling Three as their new leader upon the death of Dynaguy, which he also later left. He appeared alive at the wedding of Elastigirl and Mr. Incredible, but during the superhero ban, Gazer Beam was an activist for superhuman rights, wanting the ban on supers to be revoked. 15 years later, he would be one of the most recent victims of the Omnidroid, with Bob having noticed his disappearance becoming a story in the newspaper. His final act before dying though was to use his powers to carve Kronos on the cave wall in which he was hiding, in the hopes that someone would discover it and put an end to Syndrome's evil schemes. An act that was really what made the Incredibles able to stop Syndrome's scheme and save the day, since without it Bob wouldn't really have learned what the mission was. And yes, I used a character from the Incredibles on this list because he was a superhero in the past. Deal with it. And at 8, Stardust the Super Wizard. However, this is a case of a superhero forgotten in the past, so another use for the term from the past. Stardust the Super Wizard is a fictional superhero from the golden age of comics who originally appeared in American comic books published by Fox Feature Syndicate, and first appeared in Fantastic Comics number 1 in 1939. Stardust the Super Wizard was featured in 16 issues of Fantastic Comics, and this was before superheroes were really trying to be better than criminals, as Stardust would basically kill all of his enemies in various ways with his wide array of powers. And when I say wide array of powers, I mean it. This guy has about as many powers as a Lantern Corps, if not more. Superhuman strength, speed, durability, and endurance, vast knowledge of interplanetary science, master of space and planetary forces, skilled detective, formidable brawler, accelerated perception, extrasensory perception, augmented respiration, interplanetary flight, indestructibility, telepathy, transportation, metamorphosis, transmogrification, telekinesis, selective omniscience, which is awesome, and luminous skywriting. And then throw on whatever other powers he needs to have thanks to the story, because he's a freaking wizard and it's 1939. This, with the combination of just offing people he didn't like, makes him absolutely nuts, but I love it. And at 7, Dark Knights of Steel. Coming in November of this year, Dark Knights of Steel will basically be DC meets Game of Thrones. The series is written by Tom Taylor and takes place in a medieval fantasy world, where a spaceship crash lands from a doomed planet. So not only will the Dark Knight be here, but so will Superman and Wonder Woman, along with Harley Quinn, Black Lightning, and more. Tom Taylor told Entertainment Weekly, quote, "I've spent the last 2 years creating a new epic fantasy universe for DC Comics, and Dark Knights of Steel is an absolute dream come true. Despite being the writer of the DC horror series Deceased, I am actually a huge fantasy fan, combining two of my favorite things, DC superheroes and high fantasy. It's my absolute happy place, and honestly, I couldn't agree more. I love medieval stuff. It's why I love Skyrim and Game of Thrones, and why my name is the Cheese King. I love fantasy stories, and I can't wait to sink my teeth into this one, especially when in the preview we got for this series, we can see what is in essence a character sheet base, or like character stats for Superman. So if they include one of these with every issue, you can have a real DC based fantasy Dungeons and Dragons game with like official stats. And that sounds f***ing awesome. Who do you hope shows up in this series? I'm hoping to see the Flash, but like medieval, but like, hey, you let me know your thoughts down below. And at 6, Ogon Bat. Ogon Bat is a Japanese superhero created by Suzuki Ichiro and Takeo Nagamatsu in 1931, who originally debuted in a kamishibai, which is a paper theater. Ogon Bat is considered by some to be the world's first superhero, and is a precursor to later superhero characters such as the Japanese Prince of Gamma, as well as well-known comic book characters like Superman and Batman. Ogon Bat was created by 16-year-old Takeo Nagamatsu and 25-year-old Suzuki Ichiro in 1931. And the two were inspired by drawings of mythological characters in Tokyo's Unio Royale Museum to create a new hero based on science rather than mythology. Ogon Bat is a being from ancient Atlantis who was sent forward in time 10,000 years to battle evil forces threatening the present day. He has a golden skull-shaped head, wears a green and white swashbuckler outfit with a high-collared red cape, and carries a rapier. His superpowers include superhuman strength, invulnerability, and the ability to fly. Plus, I mean, he was sent 10,000 years in the future, so if that's not the past, then I don't know what is. Halfway through into number 5, Danny Phantom. Young Danny Fenton, he was just 14 when his parents built a very strange machine. It was designed to view a world unseen, that realm being the ghost dimension aptly named the Ghost Zone. When it didn't quite work, his folks, they just quit. Then Danny took a look inside of it. There was a great big flash and everything just changed. His molecules got all rearranged. And then this 14-year-old kid gained the ability to transform into a human or into a ghost. Danny Phantom is one of my all-time favorite cartoons, and it helped to shape me into who I am today. So of course I'm going to include it as a superhero from the past, because he's from my past, okay? That's right, I found a way to work it in. While in his ghost form, Danny has multiple abilities, including flight, invisibility, intangibility, and to possess people at first. However, as the series goes on, he gains more abilities, such as ghost rays, which are bolts of energies from his hands, cryokinesis, and his ghostly wail, which he learns sooner than he's supposed to, thanks to a version of himself from the future, who he ends up fighting in the 2-part hour-long episode titled Ultimate Enemy, in which present Danny gets dragged to the future, where he's turned evil thanks to combining with his primary adversary and uncle, Vlad Plasmius. So he also got dragged into the future, thus meaning that he was from the past. Boom! You looking for this? In it for Phantom Rider. Carter Slade was born and raised in Ohio in the mid-19th century, along with his brother Lincoln. Eventually, Carter decided to move out west to the new territories in order to become a school teacher at a new settlement in Montana. However, he came across a group of people slaughtering helpless homesteaders. Though he fought bravely, Carter was eventually defeated, shot multiple times, and slowly dying from his injuries. He was brought to a native medicine man called Flaming Star, who had many years before seen a shooting star that brought with it a special dust. Flaming Star took this as a sign that a champion would one day be sent to them to fight injustice. He believed that Carter was this champion and gave him most of his costume along with the dust, which Carter used to make the rest of it and tame a white horse he called Banshee. However, Carter would eventually die while trying to save his brother Lincoln from a cave-in, which results in Lincoln taking over the mantle of Phantom Rider. Basically, it's Ghost Rider from the Old West. And I think it's without the demon. Getting close to the end in number 3, Captain America. After being a kid from Brooklyn who just wanted to help, Steve Rogers volunteered for an experimental procedure to make super soldiers to aid the Americas during World War II. However, after the experiment was successful, the rest of the equipment was destroyed along with the genius behind it. However, after falling from an experimental drone plane into the North Atlantic Ocean, he spent decades frozen in a block of ice in a state of suspended animation. Quite literally being a superhero from the past, even in real world standards, since this was also his reintroduction into the Marvel Comics Silver and Bronze Age. I think we all know this story at this point thanks to the absolute success of the MCU, but it's still easy to forget that Cap was originally from the 40s until comic books were on the rise again in the 60s, which is really interesting because, like, in the most literal sense of the word, Captain America is a hero from the past, and is probably the most fitting character for this list for that reason, but there are a couple more that I wanted to talk about, so I put him at number 3. Penultimately, in at number 2, Black Knight. Marvel Comics' first Black Knight, Sir Percy of Scandia, first appeared in the medieval adventure series Black Knight numbers 1 to 5 from Atlantic Comics, the 1950s precursor to Marvel Comics, and this ran in 1955. The original Black Knight is Sir Percy of Scandia, a 6th century knight who serves at the court of King Arthur as his greatest warrior and one of the Knights of the Round Table. While the modern Black Knight seems to be making an appearance in the Eternals, the original Black Knight was recruited by the wizard Merlin and adopts a double identity. He pretends to be totally incompetent until changing into the persona of the Black Knight. As the Black Knight, Percy wields the Ebony Blade, which Merlin forged himself from a meteorite. The modern version, known as Dan Whitman, is the original Black Knight's descendant and the supervillain Black Knight's nephew. He inherited the mystical Ebony Blade that carried a curse and took the Black Knight mantle to help restore honor to it. And I gotta say, it's a really weird family dynamic that you got going on. This family reunions must be really awkward. Finally, in at number 1, Paul Manning. In the year 5700, we see a hero known as Paul Manning, who would appear whenever the world was in danger. However, it was revealed that this Paul Manning was in fact the Green Lantern known as Hal Jordan, who would be brought to the year 5700 by the Solarians. They would also wipe his mind and clear his memories to implant him with new ones, which is where Paul Manning came from. It was a created identity by the Solarians to get Hal to save them whenever they were having issues, or maybe if a really important cat was stuck in a tree. Eventually though, after being brought to the future many times, Hal ended up subconsciously creating an evil doppelganger of himself who took over the Paul Manning identity, and went on to terrorize the Solarians. He would then be defeated by actual Hal and would be converted into a functioning member of society. However, this was also all pre-Crisis, and after the collapse of the multiverse this no longer applies to the main continuity version of Manning. But it's still pretty interesting nonetheless. Like, imagine being pulled into the future and not even knowing it. By that logic, any of us could be from any point in the past, and we just wouldn't know. And at 10, Cassandra Kane. Cassandra Kane is the 4th Batgirl. Born with the assassin David Kane and Lady Shiva as her parents, she was trained to become the perfect warrior. Her father deprived her of speech so that she would learn movement and physicality as her first language. Batman adopted her into the Batman family during No Man's Land to replace Helena Bertinelli as Batgirl. Cassandra would eventually turn her Batgirl costume over to Stephanie Brown and become a member of Batman Incorporated as Black Bat. Trained by her father to be the ultimate weapon, Cassandra was not taught to speak. Instead, her father relied mostly on actions to communicate with her. He also cut her off from the outside world, only exposing her to anything or anyone other than him when absolutely necessary. As a result, the parts of her brain normally used for speech and language processing were trained so that she could read other people's movements and body language to recognize their thoughts without verbal communication, and predict with uncanny accuracy their next move in a fight. This also caused her brain to develop learning functions different from most, so it's like a form of dyslexia that hampers her ability to talk, read, and write. And at 9, Beast Boy. Beast Boy's parents, Mark and Mary Logan, were geneticists that would travel the jungles of the world to study their wildlife. Beast Boy was brought up in the jungles of Brazil, Africa, India, and several other places. The Logans became particularly interested in a rare species of green monkey, which honestly I understand. But the day they finally found them, something terrible happened. Beast Boy was bitten by one of these monkeys and contracted a serious illness called cicudia. To save him, his parents attempted to cure him with a new serum, which bestowed him with his iconic shape-changing abilities, and as a side effect, his skin, hair, and eyes all turned green. Beast Boy was originally the youngest member of Doom Patrol, however revealed in Homecoming, Mento's harsh discipline and less than encouraging attitude finally alienated him from his surrogate family, and he stuck out on his his own. Looking for a new place to live, he came to Jump City, where he encountered Robin, Starfire, Raven, and Cyborg. Afterwards, the five formed a new team of their own, the Teen Titans. And it ate Aqualad. Operating as Aqualad by his king's side as the first leader of the Teen Titans, he briefly worked under deep cover as the loyal lieutenant of his father, Black Manta, to bring down the Light and their partner. Eventually, King Orin retired his heroic duties and Calder took over the mantle of Aquaman, joined the Justice League, and became their leader by July of 2018. In February 2019, he officially stepped down as their leader, and Aqualad eagerly expected to become a member of the Justice League alongside Speedy, Robin, and Kid Flash. However, when it became clear that that wasn't happening, he decided to accompany Robin and Kid Flash to investigate Cadmus Labs. There, they found the Genomorph Project and Superboy, whom they liberated. Aqualad, Kid Flash, and Robin set off on an unsanctioned mission to protect CEO Selena Gonzalez from the League of Shadows, but despite their best efforts, Gonzalez still vanished. And at 7, Miss Martian. When she first came to Earth, Miss Martian was a bubbly, exceptionally sweet, polite, and caring individual, although occasionally shy young Martian girl who longed to fit in on Earth and become a member of a team. However, being from Mars and having never really interacted with humans before, she was frequently unfamiliar with Earth's customs. She felt especially uncomfortable with her telepathy, as on Mars it's the prime form of communication, but on Earth it's not really a thing. But she was also quite inexperienced, but eager to please. By 2016, she had become considerably more serious, but still retained her caring side. She's become more experienced and adept at using her powers, and isn't afraid to use extreme measures to exact information. As a shapeshifter, she can model her appearance to her desire, which is usually that of a green-skinned female humanoid based on Mary Logan as a teenager, with amber eyes and shoulder-length red hair. Though after 5 years she now keeps her hair shorter at length, but it still grows longer over the months, which she must be doing consciously, because she's a shapeshifter. It's because the hair won't naturally grow if you're just pretending it exists. So she has to be consciously slowly growing her hair, which is interesting to me. And at 6, Tara Markov. Also known as Terra, had manifested the ability to manipulate Earth. She can levitate Earth, manipulate its shape and configuration, like raising the floor to make a shield, or alter its state, like turn hard Earth into a substance similar to quicksand. So basically she's the DC version of an earthbender. Tara was a child when her powers emerged. Markov's parents freaked out though and thought that she was possessed by evil. She was abandoned and forced to live in the streets eating out of dumpsters. So Deathstroke was contracted by Brother Blood, leader of Hive and the Church of Blood. He eventually wanted Deathstroke to capture all of the Teen Titans for him. Deathstroke heard of Terra Markov and her powers, and he devised a plan to use her as a spy and, if needed, a bargaining chip. He also went to Markovia and intervened in an attempted public execution. Terra was tied up to a vehicle and dragged around while the mob chanted for her death, calling her a witch and a demon. Deathstroke sliced the head off the man who was holding a gun to Terra's head, and she was later taken in as the latest member of the Teen Titans team. Halfway through in at number 5, Wonder Girl. Cassie Sandsmark was the second person to be called Wonder Girl, the first being Donna Troy. Cassie was the daughter of Dr. Helena Sandsmark and the Greek god Zeus. She spent most of her time at her mother's place of work, the Gateway City Museum of Antiquities, where she had a penchant for getting into trouble. She quickly befriended her mother's new employee, though, Wonder Woman, and was eager to help her. During a fight with a Doomsday clone and another battle with Decay, she created a costume and used magical acquirements, the Sandals of Hermes and the Gauntlet of Atlas to be exact, to help Wonder Woman, much to her mother's horror. Cassie later had the opportunity to ask Zeus for a boon and requested real superpowers. Zeus granted her request but gave Dr. Sandsmark the ability to deactivate them. Dr. Sandsmark, however, reluctantly accepted her daughter's wish to be a superhero and rarely, if ever, used this ability, and Artemis was assigned to be her teacher. Zeus giving her mom the ability to turn off those powers though is actually probably the most sensible thing someone has ever done in the DC universe, straight up. Good on you, Zeus, bro. This is the most sensible version of Zeus I think I've seen, at least in this instance. And in 4, Damian Wayne. Sometime after Batman became a public hero, he fought Ra's al Ghul and the League of Assassins. During his adventure, he met Raz's daughter, Talia al Ghul. The two young adults fell for each other and, after a brief fling, they conceived a child. Bruce was unaware of the child's conception though and returned to crime fighting for years. Talia, on the other hand, taking advantage of the hero's impressive genes, believed their child to be the perfect heir, and the child was born and given the name Damian. Talia then used the League's extensive scientific resources to inorganically speed up the child's aging, giving him the physiology of a 10-year-old in less than 5 years, which was also used as a plot device to make sense as to why he would be meeting his father. Eventually though, when Talia deemed that Damian was ready, she allowed him to go to Gotham and meet his father, the Batman. Batman was surprised to learn that he had a secret son with a supervillain, but sought to learn more about the boy anyway. Despite his intense training to become a remorseless assassin, Damian was sympathetic to his father's vigilanteism in Gotham and volunteered to become his next sidekick. Batman agreed and granted Damian the mantle of Robin, his fourth ward to use the name, which should already kind of indicate the path of this thing kind of takes there, Damian. So maybe not serve yourself up as a human sacrifice for character building purposes next time. Getting close to the end, at number 3, Kid Flash. Bartholomew Bart Allen is a speedster from the year 2056 and the grandson of Barry Allen. When he came to the past, he joined the team under the name Impulse, and after Wally West's death, he took on the mantle of Kid Flash. He later joined the Outsiders. But given the dire situation that his time is in, Bart is serious and slightly jaded, who was greatly appreciative of his extended family in the past. Whether accidental or intentional, Bart constantly spoils information for people about the future, such as revealing Robin and Nightwing's identities to Beast Boy, and that Iris West Allen was carrying twins. This was also adapted into the CW show The Flash, where Bart and Nora are actually Barry's kids instead of grandkids, and they take on the name of the Tornado Twins over Dawn and Dawn, since they don't exist. I guess Flash writers thought that was a little too much. Penultimately, in at number 2, Raven. Raven, also known as Rachel Roth, is a superhero with magical abilities and a prominent member of the Teen Titans. Raven is a tele-empathetic, and she can teleport, send out her soul self, which can fight, like physically, manifest as a force field, manipulate objects and others as like with telekinesis, and it can also act as Raven's eyes and ears away from her body. Raven was born the half-breed daughter of a human mother named Angela Roth and the demon overlord Emperor Trigon. Eventually, she learned that Trigon was planning to come to her dimension and vowed to stop him. She initially approached the Justice League, which they refused on the advice of Zatanna, who sensed her demonic parentage. In desperation, she reformed the Titans as the new Teen Titans to fight against her father. The team was eventually able to defeat Trigon and seal him in an interdimensional prison. However, Raven still had to fight her father's influence because he wasn't actually completely destroyed, so she was still part demon. Yeah. And finally, in at number 1, Superboy. Superboy, aka Con-El or Connor Kent, yeah, you know why I mentioned that, was a genomorph, a binary clone of Superman and Lex Luthor, and a founding member of the Young Justice team. On February 25th, 2019, Superboy had revealed himself to the world and left the team in order to become a member of the Outsiders. After he became engaged to Miss Martian, the couple traveled to Mars to prepare for their upcoming wedding, but he historically sacrificed himself to protect the Martians from a gene bomb. Before this though, Aqualad, Robin, and Kid Flash discovered the Genomorph Project and Superboy, whom they liberated. The 4 youths stood up to their mentors and declared that they were ready to prove themselves as heroes. While Batman considered their argument, Kid Flash and Superboy stayed with him. Together they faced the Terror Twins at the Central City Mall, and they formed a covert ops team where they were given their own headquarters in Mount Justice. And they were introduced to Miss Martian, which would ultimately lead to Superboy's death. So, sorry bro.
Coming in at number 10, we've got Genie. We'll start with one that seems to cause some continuity clashes, but it's plenty entertaining anyway. Throughout the 2099 universe, we meet descendants and followers of heroes that made Marvel so famous. Great-grandchildren of classic heroes are all about, and oftentimes the original supers have died, disappeared, or become decrepit to fight crime. New folks come around to replace the old folks. It's the way of the world. However, in many Marvel stories, Doctor Strange manages to outlive all sorts of folks thanks to his magical abilities. This is not the case in 2099 though, as he's nowhere to be found. In his place is another person who goes by the name Strange, and this time it's a woman. Also known as Genie or possibly Sorceress Supreme, this magical mistress realized she had magical abilities and worked to perfect them on her own. Idolizing her older brother, she followed him one day and witnessed him being attacked by Skrulls. Attempting to scare them away, she tried to conjure an illusion of a Lovecraftian monster and ended up actually summoning an eldritch monstrosity. This didn't end up well for anyone, as she ended up accidentally killing her brother. Whoops. From there on, she underwent more training and started helping other heroes in various capacities. With all sorts of powers fueled by the mystic arts, she can do a whole lot of wicked things. From healing injuries to teleportation to casting sleep spells, she's got it all under control. Plus, she is immune to timeline distortions, which proves to be helpful quite often. So don't mess with Mademoiselle Strange. Coming in at number 9, Deadpool. Wade Wilson who? Well, actually it seems that Wade is indeed still around, but in 2099 his daughter Warda has taken up the mantle, and she seems to enjoy torturing him, which is interesting. Add in a mother who was once queen of the undead and you've got one hell of a mix of powers. She has Wade's regenerative powers as well as some possible vampirism from her mother's side. Absolutely wild. To make her potentially even more effective, she doesn't seem to share her father's sense of humor. Less goofing around, less cracking wise, and more violence. The weapon proficiency is still there too. Nice. Warda spends most of her time attempting to figure out where her mother is and eventually finds her true family, so good for her. Coming in at number 8, Moon Knight. Let's go, Moon Knight. In 2099, they're actually on the moon, and she's no longer Mark Spector, but an unknown individual with a totally secret identity. How cool is that? Wielding a bevy of powerful gadgets and weapons, Moon Knight acts as the server of vigilante justice on the moon-based city of Adelan. Stalking the night, or whatever version of night is on the moon, she keeps the many Inhumans who call that place home as safe as she can. After accidentally wandering into the forbidden citadel of the Watcher, she convinces Uatu to let the Fantastic Four constructs to stick around longer until they've lived up to their former lives. Good on you, Moon Knight. Coming in at number 7, we've got Ghost Rider. To be honest, I'm a little disappointed that Nick Cage isn't the Ghost Rider in 2099. This implies that Hollywood's most controversial leading man doesn't make it until then, and that's just a shame. Thankfully, Ghost Rider is still wicked cool in the future and comes packing some new weapons and powers. Gone are the days that Ghost Rider is a literal magical skeleton flying around on his flaming motorcycle. In 2099, Vengeance got an update. Kenshiro Zero Cochran, computer hacker extraordinaire, ends up with his mind inside of an insanely powerful robot body. A Cybertech 101 warbot to be exact. And this robot is jam-packed with all sorts of futuristic weaponry, from eye lasers, to a hand that can transform into a whole bunch of weapons, to a retractable chainsaw embedded in his arm. Oh, and also a 50 caliber gun and grenades. Still a weapon for vengeance though, Ghost Rider manages to project the image of a flaming skull, just like the OG, using his holographic capabilities. Now that's how you future-proof your superhero. Coming in at number 6, Hulk. Our futuristic gamma-fueled beast is definitely a contender for strongest ever. However, unlike the original Hulk, he's not quite immortal. I won't get into the nitty-gritty here, but even a base power higher than the first Green Giant isn't enough to keep you alive against all odds. Too bad too, because this is a really cool reimagining of a classic hero. In 2099, a movie producer named John Eisenhart decides he wants to do a movie about the Knights of Banner. This group worships Bruce Banner like a god and tends to move around all over the place. When Eisenhart finds out he can't get the rights to their story, he turns them into the police, but feels guilty afterwards. He tries to find a way to help them out, but gets caught in the blast of a gamma bomb, turning him into a brand new green monstrosity. He's got more base strength than the original Hulk, sharp teeth and claws useful for ripping and tearing, and even holds onto his human intelligence once transformed. Able to lift up to 150 tons and leap hundreds of feet in a single bound, this version of the Hulk is a force to be reckoned with. Coming in at number 5, we've got Thor. This might come as a bit of a surprise, but in the future, a lot of people worship superheroes, and a lot of the time, those who revere these supernatural figures are interested in attaining these godly powers for themselves. In 2099, a subset of people have decided to give themselves to Thor, mind, body, and spirit. Known as members of the Church of Thor, or Thorites, they all have the hallmarks of many other major religions, down to the places of worship and religious leaders. Cecil McAdams was a reverend of the Church of Thor, and was actually chosen to take up the mantle of the Norse god of thunder himself. Through technological advances and a whole lot of self-deception, McAdams ended up with almost identical powers to the god that he worshipped. This resulted in some less than stellar mental issues though, as he went a little power crazy and tried to rid an entire city of mortals. Coming in at number 4, we've got Exodus. Born as Bennett du Paris back in the 1300s, this mutant is all about changing up the world order. He has and always will believe that mutants should be in charge of the world, with humans as the inferior race. This was true before 2099 and remains true in said futuristic world. Showing up after a long sleep, Exodus attempted to force his rule upon X Nation. They weren't too happy with this, so Exodus defeated them. Using telepathy, teleportation, and resurrection, he's almost undefeatable. Factor in that he refused to save the humans before Mademoiselle Strange teleported the survivors away, and you've got one bad, powerful dude. Coming in at number 3, we've got Punisher. Even way off at the turn of the next century, Punisher's gotta punish. Frank Castle no longer wears the gigantic skull, instead it's a guy by the name of Jake Gallows, which is appropriate. This ex-Thorite actually grew up with Cecil McAdams as his reverend, but we'll save that story for a rainy day. He lost his family to violence and then came across the old war journals of the original Punisher. With this, he decided he would dedicate his life to punishing. At first, he was a member of the pay-per-use police service, but eventually ended up as Doom's Minister of Punishment. As one would expect, this makes it very dangerous to be deemed a criminal in the future. Strapping, angry, and constantly firing guns in both hands, the Punisher does what he does best. Hell, he even has a hand in killing the new Thor. Coming in at number 2, we've got Spider-Man. If you want a crazy origin story, look no further. In the future, there's one company that seems to have an upper hand over the rest: Alchemax. Miguel O'Hara was a scientist working for them, reluctantly performing genetic experiments on less than willing test subjects. After turning a man into a horrid beast that died quickly, O'Hara decided he'd had enough. However, when discussing this with his boss, he accepted a drink that turned out to be laced with Rapture, a highly addictive substance that bonds with the DNA of the person using it. This was supposed to keep O'Hara addicted, and therefore an employee of the company that produced it for the foreseeable future. In order to reverse this addiction, though, O'Hara attempted to rewrite his own genetic code. This procedure was sabotaged by his boss, but ended up including some spider DNA in the process. Thus, Spider-Man 2099 was born. Jam-packed with spider powers, but actually lacking any form of spider sense, O'Hara decided to start fighting crime. Donning a spider suit to hide his identity, he puts his powers to use. Increased strength, agility, stamina, regeneration, some telepathy, claws and fangs, and even spinnerets that generate organic web, and more. Spider-Man is always a fan favorite, that's for sure. Finally, at number 1, we've got Dr. Doom. Unlike most of the other heroes on this list, Doom isn't a clone or a copy or even offspring of another individual. It's still Doom. After disappearing for decades, Dr. Doom decided to upgrade his armor and make a triumphant return. And triumphantly return he does. Coming back in full force, he manages to retake the United States and force his way into a leadership role. Like I said earlier, he employs Jake Gallows as his Minister of Punishment and begins ruling with an iron fist. There really is no stopping Doom, even in the future.